Sophie.
Hi, Sin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Gaming in the Yeltsin Years, episode
7.
And today we're going to talk about Kagero, Deception 2.
And also Deception 1 a little bit. And then at the end I'll mention Deception 3 and Deception 4 and also Kagero 2, which is not Deception 3. And there's also Deception 4 2, which is not Deception 5.
This is more complicated than the Fallout series. Now, Sophie.
Yes, Sin.
You're a deception expert. You played many deceptions.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I played Deception and Kagero a lot as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I got into it with the first Deception game, largely because I was at the rental store and there was just a box with a creepy-looking castle and it just had Devil's Deception, and I'm like, I'm there. I didn't know what it was. I got it, I took it home, it was incredibly confusing, but I became obsessed with it, and I bought a copy of it, and I still have that copy.
That's amazing.
And then later on, I found out that there was a second Deception game called Kagero.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think I got even more into Kagero, despite the fact that it's a little less deep than the first Deception game. So yeah, I've played the first two a bunch. My knowledge starts to taper off after that, but I do have the other games in the series.
So, tell us about Deception 1.
Well, Sin, you've seen little bits of Deception.
Yes, I have.
How about you start by telling us a little bit about Deception?
Deception is a game that takes place, I don't know when, but the point is you're a character who works for some sort of immortal vampires or demons or something called TMDs.
They're called Time-Noids brackets TMD every time it's used. Yeah.
Oh my god! Time-Noids! It's time! Yes! Okay! Yeah, so you work for, as a human, you work for these weird people. And what you have to do is essentially, I guess, protect them by setting up traps in their place of dwelling to keep other people away.
Yeah. The Deception games have always interested me because they're essentially like a survival horror game in reverse. Where instead of you being someone who has stumbled into this hostile environment and is trying to sneak around it and avoid traps and avoid enemies and find something, you're actually in control of that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And your job is to stop the people who are trespassing in your space.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have to kill them, which is kind of an interesting mechanic that leads to a branching plotline later on. But essentially, the way that you defeat or frighten off or weaken or confuse the people who have trespassed into your castle is that you have to set traps and then trigger them in such a way that they will affect the people who have trespassed into your castle.
It's very Home Alone.
It is. It is very, very Home Alone. So the thing about the traps is that, like, they're very, very comedic in nature. They're very, very exaggerated and they're very slapstick. So even though if you explain the plot of the games, it's all like summoning Satan and like murdering people and like brainwashing children.
Yeah.
And weird immortal vampires.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the traps are very, very jokey kind of takes the edge off.
Yeah, it takes the edge very much off because you can use traps to make funny combos. Like you'll have spikes, spike someone, and then you'll have at the same time a rock fall on them, and then another thing push them into the fire. Yeah, it's not like threatening at all.
Yeah, so like examples of the traps would be things like there's a giant magnet on the wall, or like the floor is spring-loaded and it just pushes you over when you step on it,
Yeah.
There are things like you can just drop a vase on someone's head so they start
Yeah.
stumbling around and they can't see where they're going. You can like drop a boulder on a flight of stairs so that it rolls down and squashes someone.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying, the way in which the game kind of wants you to play it is it wants you to combo those traps together.
Mm-hmm.
So an example of like a trap combination would be something like you can drop like a thing of oil on someone
Mm-hmm.
and then blind them so they can't see where they're going, causing them to walk directly forward into a fire. And the more you combo those traps together, the more and more whatever currency the game is kind of using, you will get.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a bit Rube Goldberg, but it's happening in this like weird haunted gothic castle where you're playing as like a creepy anime goth girl.
Yeah.
The other thing about the games that's interesting is that the people who trespass into your castle, they're not just going to be like a generic like knight walks in the door. They will actually show up with a specific goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that goal might not actually be to hurt you. It might be to do something else. And you usually have the option, unless their goal is explicitly killing you, of just kind of letting them do that and leave.
And depending on how many times and where you do that, you actually get different endings.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, an example is in Kagero, which is the one that I showed you. The first person to trespass in the castle is just some rando from the village whose name is Da.
Yeah.
Da has no idea what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and he's actually been summoned to the castle as part of an initiation thing for you to see if you will kill Da, right? So basically, Da's whole thing is he walks up to you and he basically asks, what's going on? If you want, you can kill Da. He's not that difficult because he's just some guy from a village. But
Mm-hmm.
you can also go, there's nothing wrong. And Da will just turn around and leave. But
Mm-hmm.
as he's leaving, you can actually just set a trap and kill him anyway. And then that, like you said, causes the plot to branch off in one of two directions.
Mm-hmm.
If you leave Da alive, Da will go back to the village and tell one of his friends, hey, I went to this castle, there was this creepy girl there. But if you kill Da, the same friend notices that Da has disappeared and he goes to look for him.
Mm-hmm.
So you start getting these like branching pathways. There's a much more complicated one later on where the castle gets invaded by these two different soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like Da, you can attack them or you can just ignore them and eventually they'll leave. And that leads to a much more complicated branch in the story where if they leave, you just get another group of people showing up later on. But if you hurt them, their comrades from the platoon that they're part of will then go to the castle to look for them. And it's actually, you have two wholly distinct ways that can play out.
Mm-hmm.
So you've actually got like a choice there, not just in terms of the story, but in terms of do you want to fight like a different three people or do you want to fight a platoon of soldiers?
And when you say that, it makes me remember that, like, the game has a whole story and lore going on in the background about the conflict and power struggle between, like, the humans and the TMDs. And I think there's, like, a sort of hunt for immortality in there as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But your character's contribution to the entire thing is like, let me set up more traps.
Essentially, yeah, yeah. So, like you mentioned, you watched Kagero, which is Deception 2. So,
Yes.
Kagero is both like Deception 2 and also a prequel to the first Deception.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it tries to kind of retcon in this like different story that the first game didn't really have and try to come up with this
Okay.
overarching plot about the time nodes TMD.
Yeah.
So the first Deception game, which is the one I played first, that is very, very different in a lot of ways to Kagero.
Mm-hmm.
The most obvious one is it's played entirely from first person.
Right. Yeah.
So if you looked at footage of it, you might actually think it was Kingsfield. Everything is on a very basic grid, so there's not really any complexity to the architecture or anything like that. It's just a series of like square spaces that make up this castle.
Mm-hmm.
And your story in that is that you are this unnamed character who's just the prince of a place called Zamikia,
Mm-hmm.
and you are engaged to Princess Fianna,
Aw.
but then you get betrayed and framed for murder,
Oh no.
and then you die.
Oh no.
But
But
a strange blue-skinned lady appears before you,
okay.
who is at this point technically not a Time Noid TMD, but they'll call her one later. And she says, yeah, you seem to be in a bit of a bind. Have you thought about selling your soul to Satan? And you, of course, say yes.
Of course, you say yes. Yeah.
And part of that sweet deal you just got is not only have you come back to life again,
Mm-hmm.
but you're now in charge of the Castle of the Damned.
You know what that reminds me of?
You gonna make a joke about a mortgage? Or?
No. No, I was gonna say that's very Blood Omen, Legacy of Cain.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is pre-Time Noid TMD.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much just doing like there's vampires and Satan. It's a very, very like kind of Blood Omen, Castlevania kind of feel to it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Deception 1 is like a lot of first entries in series, particularly on like the PS1, is it just does a whole lot of things that the subsequent games don't do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of finding like how is this series going to work. So like not only does it look like a first person RPG, it has an RPG style inventory system, it has healing items, it has experience points. Your character has like attack and defense statistics. You have magic points, you have different currencies. You've got like the magic currency called soul, but you've also got money that you use to expand the castle. It's quite complicated. By the time of Kagero, they simplify that down to just like you're a static character and you have one currency called Arc, and you don't have an inventory.
Okay.
The main thing it does that the others don't do is that it lets you expand the castle by adding additional rooms and corridors that you choose yourself.
Oh, okay.
So you can go into a little build mode, and it just turns into a map of the castle, and you can just draw in like your own corridors and rooms, and you can add special kinds of rooms to it as well when you unlock them. So it becomes way more of like a simulation where you're just building this castle. And then when you go out of that mode, you can just walk around the castle that you built in 3D.
So this is like a Castlevania version of those factory games.
Kind of.
Yeah, I can see it getting very addictive.
Yeah, so as people who played games on the PS1 will remember, the PS1 memory cards had a total of 15 little blocks on them that you could save into.
Yeah.
And every game took up a certain number of blocks. Deception, I think it took up 9
Jesus.
because of that castle building mode. Because it had to save your bespoke castle map. So, like, I remember having Deception on PS1 and it needing its own memory card.
Yeah.
Because there was no way to, like, store anything other than Deception on this card. Like I said, they completely nixed the castle building thing later on. Presumably because it was so complicated. We'll get into like how Kagero does that later on. Kagero does give you variety, but it's done differently. The other really cool thing that Deception 1 does that the others don't do is that instead of killing or letting people go, you also have the option of capturing them and putting them in a dungeon. That is slightly harder to pull off because the way that you capture people is different to the way that you just kill them. So you have to set up specific kinds of traps. You have to use more of them. You might have to like weaken the character before you can properly capture them. But what that lets you do is you now have a whole lot of people who are in your dungeon, and you can Frankenstein them
Oh my
into
god.
monsters. You can get your prisoners, and like, I don't know exactly how it's supposed to work, but you can just do a little and now you have some zombies.
Jesus, that sounds so like unsettling. Oh my god.
Yeah, and you can put those zombies or dragons or whatever they are in the castle, and they'll just attack whatever comes past them.
Okay. So no, this is like world. No, not world. Warcraft.
Warcraft.
Starcraft. Yeah.
What I think it's most like the closest thing I can think of to this would be Dungeon Keeper, which is a series of games where you build a dungeon and populate it with monsters. The thing about Deception, though, is that like Deception plays out more as like an action game where you're controlling a specific character, more so than it does a simulation, which Dungeon Keeper is.
I know what Dungeon Keeper is because one time I lost my boyfriend for a whole week and couldn't find him because he was playing Dungeon Keeper.
Mm-hmm. Does he have like several hundred similar stories about this, but it's you in Fallout?
Did he have a similar 100 stories as you in Fallout?
Because you're like, oh, my boyfriend spent one weekend playing Dungeon Keeper, and you're like, I played Fallout for 72 hours, and I didn't realize because I love Fallout.
Thank you, Sophie.
So the monsters in Deception 1 can also gain experience and level up and turn into other monsters.
That's so cute.
If they kill enough people. Well, let's take a step back and talk about how it might not be that cute.
Oh no, okay.
One of the people that comes to the castle in Deception 1 is your fiancé.
Oh, conflict of interest.
You can, she sees that you're working for Satan and she tries to leave. Maybe you don't want her to leave.
I can change.
Maybe you put her... Well, actually, she can change. You can make her into a hideous banshee monster that is literally called She-Death.
She-Death. Oh my God. You make your own goth girlfriend.
You make your own goth GF, and then because she's the princess of the kingdom that is sending all the people to the castle, you can turn her on them. And some of them will recognize her and be like, oh shit, that's the princess.
When is Disney making an adaptation of this?
It's just like there's so much going on in the first Deception game. Like, it is like systems atop systems atop systems. It literally, some of the people who invade you will be merchants.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't actually want to fight you at all. They'll just talk to you, and you can use the money that you've gotten to just buy items from them, and they'll leave.
Oh my God.
But also, you could trap them and kill them.
But then you can't buy stuff from them, right?
Sometimes they come back.
Oh. Okay.
Sometimes.
Okay.
And the story is essentially, like, it's about this character, like, he's come back to life, he's done this Faustian pact.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, is he going to, like, tip fully over into being, like, this agent of evil who is murdering the people of the kingdom he used to be the prince of? Mm-hmm. Or is he going to, like, reject that? And, whether you kill people or let them go, whether you harvest their body parts to make zombies, whether you do any of that, all factors into the eventual ending you get. And like, if you do let your princess fiance leave without turning her into a monster, you can actually get an ending where like you just go back and marry her and everything's fine.
But you're an undead.
No, you break the curse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you can also get an ending where you summon Satan and the world ends.
I like that ending better.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
You don't have to pay a mortgage if that happens.
Kagero is, like I said, the sequel/prequel to this. It's technically set beforehand in the timeline.
Okay.
But it's the second game that came out. That we were talking about from Deception 1. So, like, there's no more building your own castle, there's no more RPG elements, there's no more inventory, there's no more monsters, and they just focus on the traps.
Mm-hmm.
Which results in the game being, like, a lot less sim-like.